Hello everybody, this is Connor, BoatsDon'tSink, and I have another deck profile for you here today. We're going to be talking about the Tokyo Revengers Dual Lane Combo deck. This is a deck that we've been working on for a little while now, and kind of keeping it secret for tournaments, but with the BRO just wrapping up today, it's gotten all the attention it needed. Top 8'd in 2 of the regions and made it on stream multiple times. So some of you might have seen this tweet that I made on Tokyo Revengers release day, saying Tokyo Revengers is broken. I will not elaborate further until the time is right. I wanted to at least wait until BRO to give the people that we were building the deck with their chance to play the deck to its fullest. Without everyone being able to build against it, because I really do think that this is one of the strongest decks in the game right now, and if you're not ready for it, it will just run you over. So jumping in, the deck list itself is pretty interesting. You got a lot of stuff that you wouldn't normally see here. We are playing 3 different climaxes. One of them doesn't even have a combo in the deck, and really the other red one that does have a combo isn't something that we're going to be focusing on very much. So let's take a look at these individual cards and what they do, since this is quite a unique deck. Normally I would talk about the climax combos in the deck, but more importantly this time I would rather talk about the not-climax combos. These cards are basically climax combos on their own in terms of how much value they give you, but don't require a climax. So first up, we have the most important thing, Baji. It's a 1/0 3000. If you have 1 or less other characters in your center stage, it gains 4000 power, making it a 1/0 7000. Pretty respectable power line. A lot of decks are going to have to at least put in some amount of effort to be able to reverse this. And at the beginning of your attack phase, if this card is stand, and you have 1 or less other center stage characters, all of your characters in center stage get the following ability. When this attacks, look at the top card of your deck, choose up to 1 revenge character from among them, reveal it, put it in your hand, and put the rest in your waiting room. So 1 Baji means you're getting to top check and add twice. So this is plus 2 cards to hand just off of playing a Baji, as long as you only have 2 front row characters. 2 cards to hand is basically what you're going to be getting out of most really good climax combos. So being able to do that without relying on drawing your climax is just incredible, and it's going to get us to max hand size really easily. The second card, the enemy in front of you, Chifuyu, very similar, 1/03k, same power condition, so great 7000 power line. And at the beginning of your attack phase, if this card is stand and there are 1 or less other characters in your center stage, all of your characters in your center stage get a different ability. On attack, choose a revenge character in your waiting room and put it into your stock. So this is going to build 2 stock per Chifuyu. And when you look at these 2 cards in combination with each other, playing 2 Baji is going to get you 4 cards to hand, 2 Chifuyu will get you 4 cards to stock, and 1 of each will get you 2 hand and 2 stock. Meaning we're building really more resources than even most climax combos are going to be able to get you. And the only downside here is that we can't put a 3rd character in our center stage. So we are going to be losing a little bit of damage over time across the game, since we're getting 1 less attack per turn in exchange for all these resources. So how do we make up for that attack we've lost every turn? Well, we do that with the finisher. The finisher lineup in this deck is designed basically just to take advantage of all of this stock that we're generating throughout the game and turn it into way more than we would get out of that 3rd attack every turn. The amount of power that this deck can put out at level 3 is enough to really end the game while your opponent is at mid-level 2, even low-level 2 sometimes. So we don't really care if we fall behind a bit in damage by not getting 3 attacks every turn, since we're going to more than make up for it. The first card we're looking at is Apologize Properly, Mitsuya. This is a 3/2 on play. Put the top 2 cards of your deck into your waiting room and deal X damage to your opponent. X is equal to the total number of soul trigger in the icons of those cards. So you play this, we're playing 6 climaxes that have double soul trigger, so those count for 2 each. And the entire game, you've been using the Chifuyu level 1 to put all of your non-soul trigger cards into your stock. Meaning this Mitsuya is often milling between 2 and 4 damage on play. And then it also has a climax combo. On attack, if the climax is in play, you choose a card in your opponent's waiting room, put it on top of their deck, and this gains 6,000 power until end of turn. Typically, we're not actually going to be going for this combo. We have a better combo instead. The climax is just there because it is a 2-soul trigger, and also, this climax profile, it's a strange one. It's on play, you choose a character with soul in its trigger icon in your waiting room, return it to hand, and then give up to 2 of your characters +1 soul. Well, the 2 characters getting +1 soul is basically a global soul in this deck, since we only have 2 characters attacking. And the adding a character with soul trigger from waiting room to hand, it's going to let us set up our finisher lineup basically in our hand every time we play a climax without losing hand size. But typically we're not going to be going for this finisher lineup, we'll just be playing the climax throughout the game for the additional damage and hand fixing. Mitsuya is almost exclusively here for his on-play effect. Second, we have Kids Meal Mikey. This is a card that we looked at in the previous deck profile I did. On play, you choose a revenge character in your waiting room, put it face down underneath this card as a marker. On attack, put all markers underneath this card at the bottom of your deck in any order to deal 1 X times, where it's the number of markers you had. And beginning of the encore step, if you do not have another rest character in your center stage, you can pay 1 to rest Mikey. This effect, usually not going to come up. Once you play the Mikeys, you're going for game and you're ending it right there. So this card is our follow-up to the Mitsuyas. Ideally, we'll be playing 2 to 3 copies of the Mitsuya level 3 onto the stage, and then we'll be playing these Mikeys on top of them to actually attack with the Mikeys for that extra deal 1. And in addition to the 2 Mikeys, you can't have Mikey without the Baji. So we are playing our everything Baji as well. Has a climax combo. This is ideally your 3rd attacking lane alongside 2 Mikeys. On play, you can pay 1 to add a climax from your waiting room to your hand. This is a +1 to hand size, which is going to allow us to meet all of our discard requirements. And B, it's going to mean that we can always have the climax for this combo in hand, even only playing 2 copies of it. The climax combo itself is at the end of the attack, you pay 8, discard 3, and put 4 other characters from stage underneath this as markers, and then sack the climax to your waiting room. If you do, you choose the Kids Meal Mikey from waiting room, play it to the stage position this was on, and put all 5 of those cards under Mikey as markers, getting you 5 more deal 1s. Meaning in an ideal game, our finishing turn is going to be something along the lines of play a Mitsuya, deal 2 to 4 damage, play a Mitsuya, deal 2 to 4 damage, play a Mitsuya, deal 2 to 4 damage, play a Mikey, play a Baji, attack with Mikey, deal 1, hit them, attack with the second Mikey, deal 1, hit them again, attack with Baji to hit them, climax combo, attack with another Mikey, deal 1 5 times, and then hit them 1 last time. So we're putting out really anywhere between 20 to 30 damage in 1 turn with this setup, and it's split across like 12 to 15 different instances of damage, meaning that even if your opponent gets some cancels, they're likely not going to cancel enough to survive even from mid or low level 2. Very often, if you just run this combo out all the way, you'll end up hitting your opponent to like level 5. So this is just an absolutely ridiculous top end. And it does have some downsides. You have to watch out for things like rest counter, things like memory kick counter. But with the way we're set up, a lot of our damage is main phase off of the Mitsuyas, and the Mikey, being able to put his marker at the bottom of deck, can actually help us dodge some things with side attacks. So the Mikey can marker soul triggers under him, and we can mill down to 1 card in deck, and then attacking with Mikey puts a soul trigger at the bottom of our deck, meaning that our next attack can side and be guaranteed to hit a soul trigger, which is going to let us dodge some counters as well. So we do have ways to play through defensive strategies at level 3 as well. Now, the consistency to actually get here, this might seem like it's asking for a lot with, around 18 stock required for the top end and a very specific hand setup allowing us to play 3 Mitsuyas, 2 Mikeys, the Baji, and have the climax. But I assure you, we actually do have all of the tools necessary to get there. First up is Bodyguard Squad Mitsuya. At the beginning of your opponent's attack phase, you can discard 1 to choose one of your characters, put it under Mitsuya as a marker, and on your next draw phase, you can put it back on the stage. So this is great for keeping our dual laners alive. If we play 2 Chifuyus to the board and attack to get our 6 stock, if our opponent removes them, then we're in trouble. So using a Mitsuya, we can discard 1 to guarantee that we're going to save one of our dual laners, and it'll come back on the next turn. His second effect is pay 1 rest, reveal top. If it's a soul trigger, you can put it in your hand. This isn't something you'll use super often, but if you need additional hand or need to pay out a climax, you can do this, especially later in the game once you've stocked a lot of non-soul triggers, you're pretty likely to hit. And this can add all of our climaxes to hand, which is also pretty good. Now, the second card, and one of the most important cards to our entire strategy, 2nd Division Captain Mitsuya, goes great with the previous card we just looked at. If we're able to guarantee that we can save 1 dual laner, Mitsuya's effect can rest 2 characters and discard 1 to choose a character in waiting room with the same name as a character on our stage, and return it to hand. So this means that as long as we can keep 1 dual laner alive, we can guarantee to salvage the other one, or really a second copy of itself in order to get that dual lane setup back. So, as long as we can keep 1 alive every turn, we're going to get double Chifuyu every turn we want it for the rest of the game and generate a ton of stock. In addition, one of the reasons that we're playing 6 2-soul triggers, whenever our character's trigger check reveals a climax with double soul trigger, we can discard a revenge character to salvage 1, which is also going to help us set up our hand for later in the game. So this card is super important, and not just at keeping our dual laners alive. It rests any 2 characters, doesn't have to rest itself. So for our level 3 game, if we're not able to get all 3 Mitsuya and the 2 Mikey into our hand, we can play a Mitsuya, mill 2, deal damage, and then rest our backstage to salvage a second Mitsuya, play that one, and then we can rest the 2 Mitsuyas to salvage a third Mitsuya. So we can just keep using the Mitsuya's effect to clone more of our level 3s in order to get our finisher set up, even if we only had, say, 1 of each of the level 3s we want in our hand. The next card, and another card that I consider very important to this strategy, is My Treasure Baji. During your opponent's turn, when this card becomes reversed in battle, you can pay 1 to rest this card, and at your next encore step, it goes to memory. So it's a nice plussing effect if you have to play this card on your first turn at level 0. You can pay 1 to get a +1. But the second effect is what we really want in this deck as opposed to most other decks. Pay 1, put this card into your waiting room, look at up to 4 cards from the top of your deck, choose 1 revenge character, put it in hand, put the rest in waiting room. So this costs a stock, but it's going to clear off the Baji from our stage, meaning we can get utility effects without ruining our dual laner setup. And that's really important because a lot of other utility cards, you would have to play them and then find a way to play over them, like with your dual laner, or else you'd have too many cards in your center stage. But Baji lets us get mill and get hand fix and pay out any stock we need to pay out without messing up our dual laner strategy. So I think this card's really important to always have access to in the deck. And it's going to give us mill to sort of fix our deck state if we cancel a lot or trigger too many climaxes, and get through first deck very quickly. One of this deck's biggest weaknesses is taking a lot of damage on first deck cycle, so Baji is able to provide that mill to get us there quicker, in addition to a lot of our other cards. The other cool thing you can do, he doesn't have to be standing to sack himself, so on any turn that you want to, say, brainstorm or use the Mitsuya level 0's rest effect, you can rest the Mitsuya 1-0 and this Baji in order to clone a copy of a card, and then just pay 1 to sack the Baji after you've rested him. The next card we have is 7th Elementary Mikey. This card is on play, gains 1000 power times the number of your opponent's characters. This is really good for reversing anything our opponent plays early. As I said, one of the worst things that can happen to this deck is taking a lot of damage early, and being able to reverse our opponent's first and second turn plays means that they're less likely to be able to tri-field and deal a lot of damage in the early game, or play a climax and maintain hand size. The other effect is to put a revenge character from hand into clock in order to check top 5, add a character, put the rest in waiting room. This is another mill 5 to help us get through our deck state very quickly, and is also a lot of dig to help us find cards that we need for our setup. We're obviously wanting to look for the level 1 Mitsuya, we're wanting to look for both of the dual laners, and then start sculpting for our finisher setup. So Mikey letting us look at 5 cards is going to help us set that up very quickly. He's also nice right after a refresh, potentially. to start getting cards into our waiting room to stock with our Chifuyu 1-0. The last bit of mill that we have really in this deck is the Emma Brainstorm. We've chosen this Brainstorm since it's a look at 3, add 1 Brainstorm as opposed to a search or salvage. It gives us the most mill for every climax that we hit. And early game, we're potentially trying to use this as early as possible in order to start getting cards in hand. Every climax that we hit on an Emma is a turn that we don't really need to use Baji as much to refill our hand back to max size, and we can focus on Chifuyu getting stock instead. Its first effect is also decent for the deck. When you play a climax, you can give a character the ability on attack, look at top 2, choose one, put it on top, and put the rest into waiting room. This is good later in the game when we might not want to deal damage to our opponent. One of the really strong aspects of this deck is that it can prevent its opponent from hitting level 3 until you go for the kill, so that they can't kill you first. And looking at top 2 means that we can maybe prevent hitting any soul triggers that we don't want, so we can side for 0 without having to worry about dealing too much damage to our opponent. And as I said, the Brainstorm effect is just great for milling through our deck, and can also find climaxes for us to play to push damage when we do need it. Also fills our waiting room a lot, which is great for the Chifuyu 1-0s to get stock. The next card we have is Draken and Mikey and Takemichi. This is a drop salvage. I've definitely talked about this card in all the deck profiles I've done. On play, or when put into waiting room from stage, pay 1, discard 1, salvage 1. Really good for early game, being able to get any copies of our dual laners that go to waiting room, or later in the game, if we're not able to maintain them on board, we can salvage them back using this. And since it's also on death, there are a lot of turns where you can play this to salvage your dual laner, play the dual laner over it to salvage the second one, if you need to. And we have Birthday Present, Emma, and Draken. Similar to the drop salvage, this is a drop search, which is going to let us get Chifuyus and other pieces out of our deck early. If we haven't milled them yet, and they're still stuck in our deck, we can get them that way. We could use the Ricky profile from the trial deck for this. I've opted for the drop search instead due to the first effect. On play, your opponent's center stage gets minus 500 power until end of turn. I think there are a lot of really strong cards right now that are plussing level 0s that are only 500 power, and being able to remove them could slow our opponent down and prevent them from being able to push us as aggressively early. Examples of this are, say, the Baji level 0 in this deck. They can pay 1 to save itself. Slime and Fate both have very similar cards with the same effect. And there are a few other 500 power either bombs or on death effects or on reverse effects out currently and upcoming in sets such as Sayakano. They're full of 500 power cards that are plussing 0s. So just being able to remove those is very strong as well. But you could play the Ricky on the slot. And the last consistency card we have is Revenge Takemichi. So this is a very interesting card. On play, if your opponent has 1 or less center stage characters, you can choose a cost 0 or lower in their center stage and put it into waiting room. Same thought, we want to be able to remove our opponent's turn 1 and turn 2 plays as consistently as possible so that they can't be aggressive. This is great against things like runners, like Millum Chaser, Rudius, Center Runner, etc. You can remove very easily. And then the second effect is very unique, very important to the deck. On play, you can put the top card of your deck into your clock in order to put the top card of your deck into your stock. Late game, if we haven't hit our exact stock threshold of 18 or 16, we can play this card to get an additional stock to meet the thresholds we need. But also early game, we can use this as an effective mill too, since we're putting 1 into clock, 1 into stock, both from the top of our deck. And then use that stock to brainstorm as early as our first turn, which can start getting through our deck and getting cards into our hand very quickly. And since this Takemichi is a card we probably want to play on turn 1 or 2 anyway, enabling those brainstorm plays is just very powerful overall. Now, there's just a couple of other cards we play in the deck that aren't there to support the strategy through consistency or being part of the strategy itself. The first one is No Matter How Many Times I Fail Takemichi. This is the 2000 power assist that you'll often see in the standby deck. And we're not actually using it for the assist effect in this build, other than maybe the assist power helps us get over, say, memory counter. But we're mainly using it for the on-play effect. When placed on stage from hand, look at up to 3 cards from the top of your deck, put them on top in any order, and return one of your opponent's characters to their hand. This is really good against decks that are going to have things like rest counter or memory kick counter. By just removing their lane entirely, we don't have to worry about those counter steps. And since we can check the top 3 of our deck, we can control where the soul triggers are going to be and know which lanes and in what order we can side attack profitably to continue dodging these counters. And lastly, we have Man of the Times, Takemichi. This is a backup from the Trial deck. This is a profile that you would typically not even consider playing in these decks. Just a 1-0, 2500 power backup, but it actually checks a lot of boxes for us in this build specifically. It is a soul trigger, meaning we can add it off of our climax that we play, and it's a hit for the Mitsuya level 3's Mill 2. 2500 power backup is pretty large and actually puts our level 1s up to 9500, which is big enough to beat a lot of things in the format right now, even some standby targets, so we can counter over defensively. We're only attacking twice a turn, so it's a 50-50. If we trigger a climax, which isn't as likely because we're not attacking 3 times, 50% chance that it's on the second attack, meaning it's our top stock, meaning we can pay it out just cleanly with this backup. And since 6 of our climaxes are double soul trigger, if we trigger it on the second attack, we can use our back row to discard 1 and salvage the backup immediately, and then use it to pay out that climax. And lastly, it's a yellow card. Yellow is an important color for the deck to let us play the Mikey level 3s and the assist, and we don't have a whole lot of yellow cards in the deck, so this Takemichi acts as another yellow card that we can level. Now for the other options in the deck. This section is actually a lot smaller than it is for most of the decks I talk about, because I think this deck is very optimized, very fine-tuned, and there aren't a lot of other cards I would even consider playing. The first one is I'll Protect You Hinata. As I mentioned, the Riki profile is another way to clock yourself to get into level 1 to start your setup quicker, to search your deck to get the pieces of your setup, and it's yellow for color fixing. And it's a +1, so you're not going to need to rely on Baji as heavily for your hand size. So all good things, and if you're not scared of playing more ways to clock yourself on top of the 7 that are already in the deck, great card to play. The second effect is also pretty decent. Being able to shuffle 2 characters from the waiting room back into the deck can help us with those late game goals of being able to side attack profitably by shuffling soul triggers back into the deck. And the other card that I would maybe consider, this was originally in my list, but I cut it once I went through, 50 or 60 games without ever playing it. Special Person Hina is the 3-2 early play heal. It is yellow, it is a soul trigger, checks a lot of the boxes that we want, and it heals. It's sack a character to heal, which you're typically not going to want to be doing in this deck just because you want your board to be the double Chifuyu stock chargers as long as possible to get all of your resources. So you would have to play this Hina and then maybe play over it if you wanted to heal at level 2. The only time this would really come up is if you get pushed by damage early and aren't ready to go for the kill and want to, say, sandbag a turn, so you could heal down a little bit so that your opponent might not kill you before you get to kill them. So if you do want it for that opportunity, you could play a Hina. If you can find room for 2 of them, you can also loop them with the Mitsuya back row by resting 2 to salvage another Hina and just keep playing them and sacking each other. But I didn't find it super important in the deck. I have just ended up cutting them for more consistency on the combo itself. So in conclusion, this deck, I probably haven't even done it justice just talking about it here. I think this deck is ridiculously powerful. It's a pretty hard deck to grasp on paper just how strong it is until you play it or see it in action and watch it just pump out 20 plus damage in a single turn to win the game. But I think it's definitely a deck you should give a try. I'm personally playing it for the Houston Regional. I think it's that strong. And as I said, it did get 2 top 8s and almost 3 top 8s in the BRO, even with just a very small number of people playing it. So very strong deck. A few other playgroups have figured out this deck lately and have been talking about it. though I see a bunch of different cards in some of the lists that I don't think are as streamlined as this list. I do think this is the best build that we've come up with so far. Big shout out to a lot of the guys over at Tressa's Collectibles, Mike, Simu, shout out to June of JKTCG. Those were the guys that came up with this originally in my circle and put it together, and I worked with them on optimizing this and getting test games in, and this is the point that we settled on. I think most of those guys on a pretty similar list. I know Simu specifically was the top 8 in the AO region BRO. He's put up a deck profile talking about his experience in the tournament over on their channel, so I'll link to that in the description. Check it out. And otherwise, thank you for watching. You can find me at BoatsDon'tSink on Twitter. You can find our store at Iron City Games on Facebook or ironcitygames.tcgplayerpro.com, where you can order sealed product and singles from us. Thank you for checking out this deck. I've been super excited to talk about it for like a month since we came up with it. I finally get to talk about it now that BRO is over. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.